Crochet and other fiber arts are a great skill to have during the collapse of the United States of America. I do think it's appropriate for you to be able to plan ahead, as we can really not predict what the world is going to look like even a month from now. Right now, the United States of America is descending into fascism, and we see how this is affecting every single other country around us. We are now in a trade war with our closest allies in Canada and Mexico, and one of our biggest trade partners over in China. We see how this is affecting the wars that are going on, and we see the United States pander to a dictatorship. There are a lot of reasons to be scared right now. This video is not here to scare you, but it is here to be a little bit realistic and to at least keep things on your mind on how you can prepare for the worst of times and keep your craft at bay, and some tips on how to get through the end of the world. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know down below if you have any other tips that you want to share with other people looking at the comments. Thank you so much for considering subscribing and liking this video. Since you are an artist and a crafter, that makes you a really interesting person. And right now, it's really important to have allies and a community. So, since you do have such an interesting thing about you, it's a really great icebreaker to make new friendships and connections. I highly recommend finding out who your neighbors are, saying your hellos, and at least establishing a relationship, whether you be in an apartment or a neighborhood. It's definitely worthwhile just to have some familiarity and some familiar faces around you. Let them know that they are around an ally and a community member that they can trust and who has a really cool skill that might just come back to help them out in the future. I know you shouldn't build relationships only if they're beneficial, but it is good to know that you have something that you can offer to your community. You can't craft on an empty stomach, so I highly recommend making sure that you have plenty of food and other non-perishable food items within your home, so that way you always have something to eat. I have taken precautions and I have gotten one of these ReadyWise food supplies that have 132 meals inside, just in case. You can never be too sure, so having something like this to make sure that you have food in case that you want to keep crafting. I'm not sure if you've ever crafted while you're hangry before, but it's definitely not a good time, and you can definitely put a lot of those angry emotions into your stitches. So something like this, or every time you go to the grocery store, maybe start a non-perishable food can collection. I've been doing that myself. Every time I go, I pick up a few cans here and there just to add to the collection in my pantry. So it's something worth considering doing just to prepare for the worst. Another tip I wanted to give to you as crafters who might want to prepare for the worst is whenever you go out to buy yarn or something for your crafting hobby, when you go to the register and it asks you for some cash back, maybe consider pulling out a couple of extra $20 bills just in case. You never know what might happen, and having all your money in a digital bank might come back to haunt you. I'm not saying take out your entire life savings and 401k and put it under your mattress or anything, but having like $40 on you might come back and really help you out in a tight situation. So consider having some cash on hand when going to buy some of your crafting tools. This can be very beneficial as well. Is knowing your worth and how you can use your skill when things are hard, especially economically. We really don't know what the world's going to look like, or even how the US dollar is going to look with all these different tariffs and trade wars happening. The United States is becoming an isolated country, and there are things that you can do to use your skill as a bartering tool. And when I say bartering, I just mean that you can use your crochet or knitting or sewing as a way to use as a currency for other services and goods that you want to be provided with. Our skill of being able to create is going to be super important when people can't get their hands on things that they may need, such as cold winters. Being able to create hats, scarves, and blankets for others might be invaluable, and people will want those things and be able to give you something that you may need in return. You need to know your worth, and this is a very high-end skill that not everyone has. So the fact that you're able to do this and create beyond just art, but being able to create things that are practical and people can use in their day-to-day is going to be so important. And this isn't just having to be practical. People will have money in the end times, and art might be even more scarce. So you can also sell that and make money through doing that. Keep a stash of yarn hidden away for a rainy day. I'm not saying to get a bunch of yarn and hoard it all. I do think though having a few extra skeins that you know that you won't touch in your quote unquote savings account might be beneficial in the long run. Have a stash that you can have reliably there when things go south. Yarn is created in many different places, and if it's overseas, the entire world would probably be tariffed at this point. So now is not a bad time to get a couple extra skeins from companies that may be going out of business, support locally as well. This, that, and the other, depending on your financial position. Have a few at the ready so you never quite run out. Don't hoard to the point where it becomes unhealthy and taking away resources from others who also might want to have some in their safe stash. I do recommend leaving some of these skeins of yarn for a rainy day out of sight and out of mind. That way you know that if anything were to happen, or maybe you have a friend come over and something happens, you have some left over. Speaking of having some extra yarn lying around, I do recommend leaving a few extra skeins in your car. You never know when you might have to go somewhere in a rush or in an emergency, and having some extra yarn and maybe a hook or two in the car just in case wouldn't hurt. I definitely recommend it, and I've done that for myself as well. We also know that driving long distances can also be really boring, so it's another great way to pass the time. Another thing I recommend doing is expanding your information bank and knowing that when the end of times come, what can you turn into yarn? You know, a lot of us are so focused on just using commercial or hand-dyed yarn from fibers, which are great, no doubt about that, but definitely consider what else you might be able to turn into yarn just in case. So some of these ideas may look like taking apart old sweaters. You can actually do that to take away some of the threads and crochet or knit with that. You can also turn plastic into yarn and crochet with that as well. And did you know you can also crochet hair? Learning to crochet hair can be an invaluable skill to have as well, to keep your hands busy when you might not have access to doom scrolling or something that keeps us occupied at our current state. I am someone who doesn't like to print as much because I don't really like using paper in that way. However, I do think it might be worth printing out a few timeless and really simple patterns for yourself that you can have stashed away at all times. You never know when you might lose access to the internet or electricity, so it's definitely worthwhile on having a few timeless patterns such as like hats and scarves or maybe even some sweaters. I also have a blog full of patterns from wearables and amigurumi that you can also make and write down as well. But it's definitely worth having a few patterns on hand that you can always go back to. Those tried and true that you can always rely on are going to be very beneficial, and having a folder where all your patterns are definitely worthwhile. I'm not saying that you should print books and books of patterns, and of course only print out free patterns or patterns that you've bought for yourself, and do not distribute, of course. But I think it's worth having a like 1 to 3 good scarf and hat and sweater patterns at your disposal just in case. Ideally, these are patterns that you can just memorize and have in the top of your head because no one can take away what's inside your brain. Right now, we can only hope for the best, prepare for the worst is a really solid way to go about things. Everything is unpredictable, and we are currently run by a complete madman in the Oval Office right now. We never know what's going to happen, and I really do hope the best for our country, but it never hurts to be over prepared. Like, disclaimer once again, I am not trying to scare you. I am not saying that you should become a doomsday prepper, but I do feel like since you do have a really unique and beneficial skill, I do think you're going to be a really important main character during these next few years, if not decades, of the world. So please take care of yourself. Don't be scared. There's only so much that you can control. You're allowed to still find joy. You don't always have to worry, but I am here for you, and I just wanted to talk to you person to person and hope that you keep safe. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have any other tips that other people can read, and I appreciate you considering subscribing. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you for the next video. Bye-bye now.